We're excited today to have our first recipients of the Titina Sila Claudia Jones Award for the Mindset Development Network. And we our comrades, sisters Inam Richardson and Onyesanwu Chatoyor.
Close,
How do you
close
say
enough. Yeah, Chatouye.
it? Chatoyer. Um, and they have an exciting experience and some serious views in terms of how the award can has benefited them as well as how it will benefit others in the future. And how we want to start today, first welcoming y'all and appreciating your taking time out to be with us, is to give a little background on your thoughts of who were Titina Sila and Claudia Jones, and what do they represent to you, and what do they represent to history? How should we view them?
Do you want to start, Inam, or should I?
Either one. I can
Why
start.
don't you go ahead, ma'am? We'll start with you.
Okay. I think it's hard to even know where to start with their legacies because, um, I mean, both of them were really on the front lines of struggle in different contexts, but the same struggle. Um, Titina Sila, I think it's interesting to start with her and her legacy because we did go to Guinea-Bissau. She was the first uh, woman freedom fighter from Guinea-Bissau that I had ever learned about. And then during my time in Guinea-Bissau, and leading up to that time as well, I came to know many other women freedom fighters who were involved with the PIGC. But I will say that for Titina, um, she's a major inspiration because we don't really tend to hear a lot about. I guess the more involved you are in the struggle, the more you come to learn and to educate yourself about women's role. But I think when you're kind of more on the outside, or you're still learning, or like for the first time and stuff like that, we tend to hear more about like Cabral and Nkrumah, Lumumba, Sekou Touré, who are very, very, very important figures. So it's not to say we shouldn't know about them, but it tends to take being like really deeply involved in the struggle before we get to hear the names like Titina Sila, for example, or Carmen Pereira, who was also a PAGC freedom fighter, actually was the first African woman to ever serve as president. She served in revolutionary Guinea-Bissau for the PAGC. And then Theodora Gomez, who I don't even know if we should start with with her now, because I'm sure we'll talk about her as part of the experience of being in Guinea-Bissau, but meeting her as an elder who's still around from that struggle in that era. So I think that, yeah, the Titina Sila legacy, having that sort of impact and then being in Guinea-Bissau, that was really powerful. I went to see her. There's like a statue in the Titina Sila garden in Bissau that I visited. And there's also a mural of her that's not very far from the PIGC headquarters. So I went there with some of the comrades in Jacques, which is the youth wing of the PIGC. And as for Claudia Jones, I think it's also very similar in the sense that she's had such a tremendous impact. I think with her, it's interesting because her she she moved around a bit. She was in the US, she was in the UK. She's of Trinidadian origin. So she kind of struggled in different places. And I think again, she's not exactly a household name, but I think that her legacy impacts, so much of the struggle. I mean, she was a theorist. She really had a lot of like intellectual contributions to the struggle, especially around concepts like triple oppression. She wrote about, so like triple oppression. She was she's an African nationalist, but she had a very clear understanding of African nationalism as a part of a global communist struggle. And so she was really able to in kind of the mid 20th century, very easily come up with the framework to bring these two things together, or to understand African national liberation as a part of this an international struggle of working people. Um, and she also was the first person I ever read who ever, like for me, who taught, like my first time coming across somebody talking about the Caribbean being united, like a sort of unified Caribbean, all the different states of the Caribbean having like one government. I hadn't actually ever come across that idea prior to me being exposed to Claudia Jones. So I just think it's very interesting. And I think it also maybe is something that could be interesting within a Pan-African framework as we're talking about the total liberation of Africa, to think about how she was able to understand, the dangers of balkanization and how basically like how the division is really just part of the sort of imperialist capitalist project. So I don't know if Onyesonu, maybe you can take it from here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said. And also, I feel like the example of Titina Sila and the example of Claudia Jones show African women, in the case of Titina Sila, like quite young African women, because I think she was recruited into the PIGC when she was like 18 years old, and she became like a revolutionary leader, like a leader within the armed struggle. And then Claudia Jones was making like concrete dialectical and historical materialist analysis that made a strong contribution to the development of revolutionary socialist ideology, specifically Marxism-Leninism in her case. And I feel like oftentimes the way that women in the movement are discussed is like in particular roles where we are not leading armed struggles and when we are not making concrete ideological contributions. And like they clearly show that we have always been there, we've always been on the front line, we've been like helping define the direction of our movements. And so that's what they mean to me, just like, especially the example, I mean, I respect them both very deeply, but Titina Cillian in particular, being recruited at age 18, becoming a leader, like a widely respected leader within the PIGC at quite young, like making her contribution. I think she was killed at age 30. So just like this very brief period of her life, studying in the Soviet Union, this very brief period of her life, she was able to make such a strong contribution to the national liberation struggle in Guinea-Bissau, to like have her held up alongside people like Cabral, Carmen Pereira. It's just very inspiring, especially in a society like a Western capitalist patriarchal society where young women are taught that we have specific roles and that's the only thing we can do. And they just prove it wrong.
Wow. I knew I was coming to school today. Having the two of you together. Great. Thank you. Um, so in line with our program and our award, we talk about analyzing the condition of African women, and particularly in Africa. Um, and I mean, this is a fairly broad question, but how would you describe the struggle or the condition of African women that in Africa that requires our particular focus?
I feel like Enem's on the ground. It's much more appropriate for you to speak.
Yeah, you
I
can
can
start that
get
one.
started because I feel like I've been having a lot of like daily conversations, and I guess one thing to say and to link it to the experience in Guinea-Bissau. Um, I was in Guinea-Bissau. It wasn't like I was there for a super long time, so I want to be cautious in terms of like how definitive in terms of statements I can make. But it does seem to me like, compared to a lot of other places where I have struggled, it seems like they have just made much progress. Like it seems like there really have been a lot of gains for the women in Guinea-Bissau. And I think some of it is seeing the way that the women are organized in a mass organization like the PIGC. And so I guess to speak very honestly, like right now I'm organizing in Burkina Faso. I've been here going on 3 years, and honestly, like a woman organizing in Burkina Faso, it can be really lonely. Like I have a sister comrade. I live with her. Her name is Fatou, and we talk about this all the time. But besides the two of us, we just can't really find other women to join us. And there's just a lot of like, it's a struggle because women who are really political, there's a lot of like the women get like ostracized for being like very sometimes being very like outspoken or opinionated on certain topics. It's very there's just a lot of like social repercussions that can sometimes even have material impacts. I mean, one of the things that we hear a lot that we struggle around is that women who are even just too educated in general, much, imagine like not politically educated, are like less desirable for marriage. And marriage is something that's very important, like socially, but it's also very important materially, for the survival of a lot of people. And so for me, it's like I was so blown away, like in Guinea-Bissau, where it's like, here in Burkina, it's really hard to find women who are engaged in Pan-African struggle in terms of, at least in the traditional sense of being involved in like a revolutionary sort of organization or an organization that's blatantly promoting Pan-Africanism. Like it's really few and far between. Versus in Guinea-Bissau, in the PIGC, I was just surrounded by so many women, and of so many different ages. So there were like women, like sister comrades who were close to my age. There were others who were elders who had been in the struggle for many generations. I mean, I didn't feel that same disparity or major gap. And like again, I said I don't feel like I can um, give like very sort of definitive statements on the status of women, because it wasn't like I was there for super long, and so I'm not the most qualified. But I was surprised. Like I talked to some of the sister comrades about um, some of the struggles around patriarchy, and it did seem like there were just significant gains in terms of like, I'd ask questions about the stigmas around organizing, around education, the pressures to get married, to have children, like, and it seemed like the way a lot of and I'm thinking mostly of like sister comrades from Jacques, the youth wing, when they responded to me, it oftentimes they would kind of respond to these pressures in terms of like the past tense, like yeah, we've had these struggles in our history, or like, we these are major things we've had to address. And not just say, like, I don't want to downplay the fact that I'm sure there's still many struggles against patriarchy that they have to wage on the ground, but it did seem like they were in a different stage of the struggle than where I'm organizing, and other places where I've organized in the past. So I really feel like for me, that was one of the biggest things, like in terms of seeing what it actually is like to be in a mass party or like a mass organization, that's actually organized to that level where they actually really have that level of presence across the country and that level of engagement among the people. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful observation. And our sister Anya Songwu, although you're not on the ground in Africa, you're on the ground every place else. And so feel free to, expand on that, or share some experiences from other um, locales and places that you have some experience with.
Yeah, my observations interacting with getting to work side by side with the sisters in the PIDC and Jack and Udamu at the PRP Party Congress is very similar to what Inem pointed out, that they have like a very high level of consciousness and also like a very high level of organization that has a material impact on the conditions of women in the country. And it reminds me, it's also actually very similar to like what it's like to interact with Cuban women. Like patriarchy still exists, but it's on a very, very different level than in places where we don't have that level of mass organization, in places where we haven't had a revolution. So I feel like, yeah, there's like a direct connection between the level of organization of Udamu, of Jack, and the PIGC, and the political development and engagement of African women in Guinea-Bissau. Like I'm thinking of comrades Deborah and Segunda, who are like quite young. Like I feel like Titina Cilia, very important to understand, was not an outlier, like very clearly. Like the elevation and leadership and political development of like young African women in Guinea-Bissau is like institutional because of the revolution, because of the level of organization that exists. And so interacting with them and like seeing their clarity, seeing their bravery, like seeing them in spaces that were like, it was like majority men, they were just like running it. I was like, this is amazing. And it clearly it shows like if it was built Like if we see the same phenomenon or a similar phenomenon in places like Cuba, in places like Guinea-Bissau, in places like Venezuela, it shows you that the conditions can be transformed in Burkina Faso, also in the United States where I live. Like when Inem was saying, like the more politically conscious and activist you are as a woman, the less desirable men find you. It's true, unfortunately. But so like, but it shows you that we can transform those conditions if we build mass organization, if we transform society, if we build towards revolution, we can like, develop the political engagement of women of all ages, of girls of all ages, and it'll be encouraged, it'll be celebrated, they'll be like essential leaders. So yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with those men if they think that's the case. No, it's definitely embedded as we're learning and as you're helping us learn about the patriarchy impact on our people. This idea that women should not be the activists, the revolutionaries, but I think the other part of that is we just don't get, as we're saying, we don't get those examples put before us, and that's the important work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party and others in providing political education. Is we've got to peel back the onion because the systems, media, and education system will bury it so deep we'll think it never existed. Um, you kind of went into my next question, but if there's some other thoughts in terms of the solutions toward the impacts of patriarchy, please you can share those thoughts at this point. Why don't you start this time on your own? Um,
Yeah, no problem. 100% building the level of organization of African women and also building our consciousness through systematic political education. I feel like that's the only way to do it. I've seen it on like a local scale, like in work study circles or organizing areas. We would have issues with patriarchy until we were able to consolidate the AWRU. And then as soon as the AWRU is consolidated, completely different situation, like completely like changed, transformed how the circle interacts with each other, transforms how the brothers engage with like sisters and non-binary folks. So like on the local level, on the national level, on the regional level, on the international level, it is really the level of organization of women and also marginalized gender people that defines what the conditions look like in terms of patriarchy. I feel like the way that capitalism, imperialism, colonialism teach us how to engage what are actually structural issues is by dealing with like individual behavior, like being like, check your privilege, or, you know, this one man transforms how he deals with women, but we're not dealing with like the structural causes of the interaction, the structural causes of the behavior. Increasing the organization of women, increasing the consciousness of the women transforms the conditions in a way that individual focus never can. So I feel like that's the main thing. And that's why across revolutionary struggles, whether it's UDEMU and the PIGC, whether it's the Federation of Cuban Women, you see like these mass, whether it's like the National Union of Sapari Women, the National Union of Eritrean Women, in the places where we had like these mass women's organizations carrying out the social revolution, you see much more meaningful leadership, much more respect for women, much more transformed conditions in terms of how patriarchy shows up. It still exists, but it's materially different. It's like it is a much higher level of struggle for us.
Thank you. Inan, your thoughts?
Okay. I mean, I agree definitely with my comrade Onyesanwu. Um, I feel like the context that I'm organizing in right now, it's very much a challenge in terms of like recruiting women, you know, and I don't know if I've particularly figured out like the solution as to how best to organize the women where I'm living, if I'm just going to be honest. Like, we've tried having special like events just targeted towards women in terms of recruiting women. I think there should be maybe more of an effort in terms of like addressing the sort of material reality in which women find themselves that prevent them from organizing. So, you know, we need to have, you know, find ways to collectivize maybe certain household responsibilities, you know, childcare and this sort of thing, in order to get, you know, the women to be more involved. But I do think that the more the anti-imperialist struggle progresses, you know, the more the, you know, the question of women's sort of role within the struggle is going to be raised. I think unfortunately right now we're seeing something where there's just a really, really heightened anti-imperialist consciousness that is widespread, and a really, really strong sort of Pan-African consciousness in terms of people all over the place calling for a unified Africa. But it hasn't really reached a place where we're addressing like these particular social contradictions. And if anything, I wonder if there's something happening in terms of almost backlash. There's an association with anything addressing gender as being, part of the Western plot, against the Sahel or against Burkina Faso. And so it does kind of put, I guess, it puts a lot of the organizing we're doing in a really hard sort of situation. So I think, we're still trying to work out the best way, because even I agree we have to strengthen the AWRU and build a mass party, but I think it's just in terms of like how do we build that when we have such a difficulty, even getting women in the room a lot of the times. I'll also say one of the things I really think could be very impactful is, because it is kind of, like I said, pretty lonely as women organizing in Burkina Faso. And I was in Nigeria in December, and I talked to some different women organizers there who said I felt very similarly. It seemed like there were some similarities in the struggle. I think the more that, if maybe we don't have the numbers here, the more we can connect the women across maybe the region or something like that to have some sort of relationship and struggle collectively across these colonial borders, maybe that will strengthen our ability to, push through, recruit, and organize or kind of develop things strategically. I think a lot about how my sister comrade here, she was in Guinea Conakry. She met with the PDG there, and she participated in a festival. And she came back and she was like, "This is the first time I ever felt like I was like encouraged actually to be part of the struggle, by all like the people around me. Like, it seemed like everybody was like embracing and celebrating the fact that I'm a woman, but I have my political opinions, I have my views, I have my, analysis on the world. I'm engaged in the struggle." And she was like, I've never been anywhere where, that was considered like a positive thing. And so I think, that connect, being in a context where there were other African women who were embraced and encouraged to be in organizing spaces. I mean, I think that was like a turning point in her wanting to really further commit to being part of the Pan-African struggle. So I think these kinds of opportunities can really help us. And I also, I think part of it is the fact that the PDG also is a mass party. I wasn't there, so I've gotten her sort of report back on it, and I know that there is kind of still a generational gap. Like the PDG seems to have mostly elder women, but it still has that mass heritage, that mass party like legacy and heritage. And I think because Guinea Conakry has had that kind of history of mass struggle, mass organization, and there's the impact of the PDG is still widespread. It still lives based on what she said. She says that it's still like the most popular, beloved party of the people to this day. I think that really speaks also to maybe a similar thing to what I was saying with the PIGC. I think she was able to be in a context of like mass party, high levels of organization, and to see the impact in terms of women's position, that kind of context.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and that you're speaking referencing the recent Pan-African Youth Festival that was held in Conakry, Guinea.
Yes, yes.
That's great. How many youth traveled there, were sponsored there from Burkina Faso to go to Guinea Conakry?
We
You
sent
recall?
4.
4. Outstanding, outstanding. Okay, my sisters, my last question, and again, so appreciate you taking time out here. And that is, what would you say to a young sister considering applying and taking this award to be sponsored to travel to Africa and do this type of research, and I put that research in quotes because we're not just looking for activism, but of course we're not just looking for academic. There has to be that legacy of activism tied to it. But I think the academic, as for many of us, as we've come to the struggle through education, that it can guide someone to figure out where they fit in and to how to fit in. Um, but yeah, what would you say to some young sisters that were considering this award, and even your thoughts in terms? Well, we can talk about that offline, how we can adjust it a little bit. Yes.
I would say definitely the academic focus is important, but I also think it's more important to think about the award as an opportunity to like make your contribution to the collective struggle to build Pan-Africanism, to liberate Africa and African people. Like think of yourself as like an active participant in that struggle, that collective struggle, and think about the contribution you can make. And for young women in particular, there's like some conditioning that we have to overcome that teaches us to like be quiet, to like fall into the background, to like not take leadership, to not like share the skills that we have. But I think if you are someone going for this award, if you are given the opportunity, then understand that that means that like this is your moment, this is your time to find your contribution, to find your place, to find your lane in the struggle, and we need you to do that. I would not have been able to participate in the Party Congress without receiving this award. And I'm very grateful for that because the Party Congress was a historic event in terms of the development of the APRP, in terms of the development of the worldwide Pan-African movement. And so I think that it's like a big responsibility to take on this award and you have to like rise to the occasion. If you get it, understand you're capable of doing that.
Thank you. And just as background, that's referencing the Congress of the All African People's Revolutionary Party that was held in Guinea-Bissau in January of, what was that, 2023, and hosted by the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, or the PAIGC. Um, thank you. Yes, Sina.
Okay, I definitely agree with what Onesanwu said. I'll just add, I really believe that um, travel, when it's done appropriately in a political context, like this sort of thing where, we went to Guinea-Bissau on both an activist and research scholarship, and what we're able to really learn from the PIGC in a way. This, we were like delegates to to the party congress, but also we were able to witness the PIGC struggle on the ground. I believe like this type of travel is also a form of political education, and I think it really um, it pushes your political analysis so much further. I mean, a lot of what I was saying on this call, that about what it actually is like to be in a mass organization, what that real impact is on the ground, that comes from my experience having witnessed what the PIGC is doing. I was, of course, aware of organizations that have like youth wings, but I had never had the opportunity to witness one and to interact with a youth wing of a mass party prior to me going to Bissau. And so it really taught me, you know, it allowed me to see like the actual impact in terms of the lives of people when you have that level of organization. And then even outside of hanging around the PIGC, like I went off and went to different places in Bissau, like, I like ate at restaurants, or, I went out one evening with some of the comrades, but I just talked to like other people, like citizens of the country who are not in the PIGC, to get their opinion, kind of see, what are what is their political consciousness like? And I saw like, okay, really, even if I'm not at the PIGC headquarters, I can talk to just regular people I meet in random contexts, and I see the majority do support the PIGC. Just, I met like random people, and it's like, oh, I've been to the PIGC, I did a workshop there. Or, I've been to their Amilcar Cabral ideological school. I used to go in the past, I haven't gone recently, but it's really made an impact on me. Or, I've done this or that activity with them. And so I realized, okay, there's there are the cadre, there are the people who are active at the headquarters every day. But then there's also the masses who've all been touched by the PIGC in one way or another, and who've all engaged with the PIGC and have received some political training and education from the PIGC. So it really, I don't know, I feel like it really, I remember like texting some of my friends and comrades who live in, some in the US, some in other parts of the continent, and like talking to them about, you know, for me, I only saw to mention Cuba, but it did really did remind me of Cuba in terms of like just a context you can feel that even though actually like right now in Guinea-Bissau, the state, like the actual like ruling government in power is reactionary, the fact that there's a major like mass party contesting that has a really solid um, opportunity to take power, and I believe will take power, you can just feel that like, okay, it's a very different political context and state of struggle than a lot of other places. And so that to me was really a form of education. So I really like, I uh, encourage everybody to read. I am co-running a library. I feel really passionate about access to books, but I also believe that if we can give more people opportunities to this sort of like delegation type of experience, I think the two of those things, it really is like ideologically transformative.
Wow, this is really great. I so appreciate it, and I think it's definitely going to help the award grow. I think it will help. I mean, once our social media group gets this is gonna go, especially now this March 2024, International Women's Day tomorrow. Um, I thought we expanded it to a month, so we'll keep it rolling the whole month. And with that, thank you, and we'll go forward from there. And I'm gonna